This is an LA Times Studios podcast.
Most of the more famous serial killers historically would kill someone, say, every 3 or 4 months or every 6 months or even every year, one person. But here, this is just killing after killing after killing. This was almost like they were just going to work every week, and this is what they did.
Hello and welcome to LA Crimes. I'm your host, Madison McGhee. Today, I'm joined by incredible Los Angeles Times reporter and friend of the show, Richard Winton. Thanks for being here.
Nice to be here as always.
It's going to be a really interesting episode. I've invited you back to talk about a case that dates back a very long time, but with some interesting new updates. We're going to be talking about the Hillside Strangler. And can you just give us a little bit of overview, refresh us on what happened back in the day?
Back in the 1970s, late 70s, we have a series of murders across Los Angeles of women. Some of them are prostitutes, some of them are just waitresses and other people. They're abducted, killed, and dumped. There's signs of they've been sexually assaulted. There's no one's quite sure what's going on. A task force formed, and they hunt for the killers. This is the start. This is kind of the start of the era of the serial killer, and this was kind of one of the first big series. And it was a scary time for a lot of people in Los Angeles.
Did you think that we'd still be talking about this case in 2025?
Be honest, no. But, this is actually has real actual still goings on. Some were sex workers, some were waitresses. These were the young women who were preyed upon in Los Angeles.
So before we get into the recent updates, let's talk a little bit about the origins of this story. So how did the beginning of the Hillside Strangler start?
Starts with a naked body of a young woman, Yolanda Washington, being found on the hillsides near the Ventura Freeway. She'd been working as a sex worker on Sunset Boulevard, seemingly had been abducted, raped, and dumped. Her body had been cleaned. They tried to basically cover their tracks. Now, that's a murder in a period where there's been other murders like this. But then shortly after, just, 2 weeks later, there's another murder. And then we see the cycle start.
And there was a pattern with these killings where the body was cleaned, and it gave signs that it was the same person?
Yeah, there were some signs. There was ligature marks on the wrists, and the neck, the ankles. Signs they'd been tied up with ropes. It was clear that, there was what you sort of say is basically nowadays, because people are used to this stuff in these sort of, talking about serial killers, signs that these cases are clearly connected. And then there starts to be a little bit of a geographic picture going on here. The first body's dumped on Ventura Freeway. The second body, Judith Miller, is in the La Crescenta area. The next body, Lisa Caston, is the Chevy Chase Country Club, and that's not that far from the second body. So we're starting to see what you can see if you put a little point, what they used to do in the old days, they put little pins on the map. You can see, hey, this is sort of all interrelated. This is a certain area of Los Angeles.
And from the jump, what about these crimes told police that this wasn't just going to be a typical murder case? What was different about this?
Well, you're seeing a constant cycle. You're like 2 weeks. There's another murder. There's another murder. So at that point, you get 3 or 4 in, they start forming a task force, and they're trying to work out where are we going with this at that stage. Obviously, they know, hey, these is likely the same person. And this is and at some point you get to the name, the Hillside Strangler.
How many murders were they discovering over a course of 2 weeks? At what point did they start thinking this feels like a pattern?
I think you think it's pretty clear by the third murder you're looking at a pattern because of the geographic dispersion, the risk, the tying, the binding, just who they're picking, And, they don't really know exactly how it's unfolding, but, they're starting to see some pattern. And then there's also, they at some point, they also later learn that maybe there's abductions which don't go right and people get away. And often when people get away, that kind of reveals stuff.
So the first murder, Yolanda Washington, was presumed to be a sex worker. And then the second one was a 16-year-old. And then the third was a waitress.
Yeah, the third was a person who'd also been a professional dancer. And, you're not, that's pretty, in this period, they used to dismiss a lot of crimes if they were involving sex workers. People kind of ignored them. That's the frank truth, something which would not happen today. But, that was almost the underlying issue with serial killers. It turns out, and years later, we now realize that a lot of their victims were the people who were cast aside and not cared about, and that's why they were able to keep finding new victims. But actually here, they start to just, they start targeting waitresses and other people. And we later learned that's because they were pretending to be the police.
Wow. Do you think that that's what sparked the deep investigation? I mean, when I hear 16-year-old, that strikes me. Of course, I live in the day and age of social media, but that strikes me as a case that would start to get a lot of attention and resources. So once that 16-year-old is found dead, is that when the tide started to shift around this case and they started to dive into it a little bit deeper?
Yeah, I mean, there's things that start to happen, but things get even worse, even darker. We're talking even younger victims. And that really often, when you're in law enforcement, when it's a really, really younger minors, then things really get dark. And that's when usually cops will go all in. They'll do anything to catch the criminals.
And we'll hear more about that after this break. Fall is in full swing, and it's the perfect time to refresh your wardrobe with pieces that feel as good as they look. Luckily, Quince makes it easy to look polished, stay warm, and save big without compromising on quality. Quince has all the elevated essentials for fall. Think 100% Mongolian cashmere from $50, washable silk tops and skirts, and perfectly tailored denim, all at prices that feel too good to be true. By partnering directly with ethical top-tier factories and cutting out the middlemen, Quince delivers luxury quality pieces at half the price of similar brands. It's the kind of wardrobe upgrade that feels smart, stylish, and effortless. It's still really hot in LA, but as soon as it hits 70 degrees, you'll see me in the Australian merino wool-cropped mock-neck sweater. It's so soft, and the cropped length is perfect for me. Keep it classic and cozy this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/LAcrimes for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/LAcrimes to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/LAcrimes. So with the waitress, Lisa Kasten, tell me more about her story and what happened with her.
What we know is she was followed home from work by the person who they now considered the Hillside Strangler. And she was pulled over by what she thought were police officers at the time, and basically handcuffed and questioned. And then, of course, it was all a lie. It was all a scam to basically just get her alone and torture her and sexually assault her and kill her eventually and dump her body after cleaning.
And after Lisa, a couple weeks later, they found 2 more bodies, and those were the younger victims that you just referenced. So tell me a little bit more about them.
Well, we have 12-year-old Dolores Dolly Cepeda and Sonia Marie Johnson. They were they got on a bus near the Eagle Rock Plaza and were heading home. And they got off the bus that's not that far away and basically were snatched. They disappeared. And Their bodies were eventually found by a 9-year-old boy, dumped near Dodger Stadium on a hillside.
And that seems to be the common thread amongst
Yeah.
other similarities between these. But the same day that they were found, another body was discovered. So the same day that this 9-year-old boy found these two young girls, they found another body, which was the 6th victim. But this is the victim that really sort of changed the course of this investigation.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that they're now getting into a lot of trouble. You have Christina Weckler. She's an honors student at the art school, college center of design. She's, the perfect student. Now they've got the same sort of ligature marks on her wrists, neck, and ankles. They're starting to connect these cases, and it's becoming pretty clear that this is something going on. So they're forming a task force. They realize now this is described as a serial killer. This is almost what they call a spree killer in the sort of FBI manual, because essentially the person just kills at a short period and keeps killing.
Well, I mean, they're getting away with it. I can't even imagine their sort of feeling of like sort of liberation of they're just doing this and no one is on their tracks. No one's showing up at their door even to like question them about anything. They're just constantly getting away with this. I mean, Christina's the 6th victim that we know of.
They only go 3 more days and there's another body. It turns out a woman, Evelyn Jane King, who's been missing since the 9th, is dumped again. Her body's found, on another off-ramp off the Golden State Freeway. So now they're literally, the killings are now outrunning the task force. They're happening so quickly, so in such quick succession.
And can you define for me, just out of curiosity, what the technical definitions are of serial killer? And spree killing is like the short period of time, but how does one define a serial killer?
Serial killers are typically like three or more people they kill. But the interesting thing here is that this is happening so quickly here that many people would consider this a spree killing, because that's where someone kills quickly in succession. And here, there was such little time. So most of the more famous serial killers historically would kill someone, say, every 3 or 4 months, or every 6 months, or even every year, one person. But here, this is just killing
Constant.
after killing after killing. This was almost like they were just going to work every week, and this is what they did.
Who killed once a year?
Well, like we have massive gaps. Like people like the BTK killer have massive gaps between killings. We have people who go half a decade before killings. So these killings are, it's when you have someone killing this quickly, it's pretty rare. Usually they kill, plan, do a new one. They often have emotional ups and downs and just make their decisions on. Sometimes they start a new relationship, which is so good they stop killing.
So very popular back in the day and still today to sort of coin killers by some sort of nickname. So Hillside Strangler has now become what they're known by, because no one knows who these people are.
Yeah, at this point, it's the Hillside Strangler. This is a period of, newspapers and headlines. And to catch a killer, you basically have to name a killer something. And this was, now the Hillside Strangler. And so now there was a name attached to the fear.
And what is the public thinking at this time? I mean, is there an uproar in Los Angeles of people feeling unsafe? Is there a curfew for women? What's going on from a public perspective?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of fear. This is a period where we don't have us anywhere near the homicide level we would later see in the 1990s and 2000s. It's more actually like the level we have now. And so these, to see these kind of killings week after week, it's just, terrifying at some sort of level, especially this is a time of things feel a lot safer. There isn't a lot of street gang violence. There's just none of that's happening really at any sort of proportionality at this stage. So these killings are really, headline ripping and terrible. And this is, this is the honors student. This is now starting to be the girl next door.
Did that add pressure to the police at all?
Yeah, it's a tremendous pressure at the time. And, they've got to try and solve these cases. But they don't, do you remember, they don't have all the advantages we have today. We don't have all the DNA science and all the forensics, cameras, all the things that should commit to do this today would be almost impossible at this quickly because we have so much technology. You'd have to have forensically perfect killings, would avoid cameras. Every freeway they drove on, every hillside, there's probably a camera now. There's a Ring camera everywhere. They would just run foul of the electronic network which exists today.
So with this case being sort of coined the Hillside Strangler across the media, we now know there were 2 people involved. So how did this nickname spread without the additional S?
Well, the police, after like 3 victims, kind of knew there were two suspects, but they weren't necessarily going to announce that. And they keep some facts back, especially in this time. They tried. It was actually harder for them to keep facts back. They used to let out all kinds of weird information back then. They literally, you see this if you ever go back to old LA Times stories. They'd print the home address of arrestees in the middle of the story, all kinds of random facts about the arrestee. They used to do this weird thing where they bring people through the back door of the LAPD, and before they read them their rights, they would occasionally let them talk to the media and then record the whole thing, which was insane. But this stuff happened back in the day. So, they tried, when they did something like this, they were trying to keep the story, close to the vest. So they knew what they were dealing with, but they didn't want to let on.
It feels like, I guess addresses aren't getting leaked now, but the spread of information today is happening. Also, it feels like information gets leaked and stories kind of go haywire and people are giving press interviews when you're wondering how that's even happening. I watch so many documentaries and it's like full camera crew in prison with someone. And I'm like, who let them in there do this?
When you're actually in the middle of the investigation, they tend to be a little bit more cagey, especially when they think they've got someone out there who's killing and killing and killing. So here they were trying to be cagey as they could be.
Did they not want the killers to know they were onto them, or what do you think the motive was there?
I think it's partly fear for the public, but also partly, yes, you don't want the killers to know you know more about their hand and you're not looking for one, but 2.
I can't help but wonder, if at around victim 3 they have that information, there goes on to be several more victims. Do you think it was a disservice not to publicize that you're looking for more people and let more victims die?
If this happened today, they would be pretty straightforward that they were looking for 2 people, because then people see one of the things is when you're a young woman and you're alone, one person comes up to you, acts creepy, you run. But when 2 people are there, you probably wouldn't have figured out there was something going on exactly right away. You don't expect people to be committing creepy serial killer crimes together.
Right.
Especially in this period. We haven't really, run into this as much.
Yeah. Yeah. And if the police have given you what to look for, then you're a little more aware. So the public was probably thinking any one person that looks weird, walk to the other side of the street, take precautions. Very interesting. So when we left off, the 7th body was discovered, who's Evelyn King. And then after that, 3 more bodies were found in quick succession. We have 18-year-old Lauren Ray Wagner in late November, 17-year-old Kimberly Diane Martin in early December, and the final victim, Cindy Hudspeth, in February of 1978. Do you know where the investigation was at this time from the police perspective, what they were gathering, and did they learn anything new from these murders that helped lead them to the suspects?
Well, I think something was going on in dynamics, maybe with the killers, because if you see, there's a kind of a gap there, which didn't happen before. So my guess is around the Kimberly Martin December killing, they got a little bit more nervous or thought the police were onto their MO and they got closer to them. It also looks like on the final killing they did in the Los Angeles area, they tried to make sure the body wasn't found so easily. I mean, the car was halfway down a cliff when they found it, her Datsun. So that suggests, hey, we're trying not to get caught so easily anymore. They're not just dumping the body on the hillside now. They're putting it somewhere they maybe it'll never be found. So they're obviously starting to try and cover their tracks.
And how did they find her?
They found her basically a helicopter pilot flying over, saw a car down the hill. Later years, we learn a little bit more about that murder, that there's more, it may not have been in the usual sequence of things.
Yeah. How did they ultimately catch the Hillside Strangler, or rather stranglers?
Completely unrelated murders in Washington State. Some people at the time in Bellingham, Washington, investigating two murders there, come across a young man called Kenneth Bianchi as the suspect.
So they find him in Bellingham, Washington. When was this? Did they fully relocate? What was happening with...
Basically, this is January 1979. This guy, Kenneth Bianchi, is tied to these two murders there. And he's clearly the suspect, and he's weird. He's acting, he's claiming all kinds of weird insanity defense. And at this stage, he starts to tell them more about some more killings elsewhere. And that's when we now know it's not just him, but his cousin is involved.
So was the cousin living in Bellingham, Washington, or was he still in California?
He was basically in California. This is what happens, but he's going to Washington. But here's what happens. Essentially, we get to 1979, and we have these two. This is the turn of the year, and we have two students missing from Western Washington, Karen Maddock and Diane Wilder. And they're trying to tie someone to the crime. And there's the security guard, Kenneth Bianchi, who they've had some connections with already, and some other people are able to make those connections for them. And eventually, they get to Bianchi, and they question him, and they basically tell him, "We think you did it." And he confesses to the crime. But he does more. He starts to tell them about the other women, the ones in Los Angeles. He basically admits to being the Hillside Strangler. But he does more than that. He implicates his cousin, who works at the upholstery business down there with him when they were there, Angelo Bueno. And so now we see a whole unraveling. Now they have names for these two people. It's not the Hillside Strangler, as most people perceived it. It was the Hillside Stranglers.
Wow. Now, in the beginning, did the police believe them? I know sometimes you have people from prisons sort of try to insert themselves in these high-profile cases for attention. What made them think that he was one of the Hillside Stranglers?
There was some similar MO. There are similarities. There were strong similarities. And back then, remember, without DNA and the other forensics, the similarities of the crime. Also, they withhold this is a common tactic, which you'll see in almost every homicide investigation. And it actually gets ruined when too much information gets out. They try and withhold some little details. And eventually, if they think they've got the person, that person will tell them those details. And when they can fill that puzzle in, they know they're the real deal. And that's what happened here. They eventually realized, hey, this security guard up in Western Washington and they knew he used to live down here, is, lo and behold, the Hillside Strangler. And his cousin and him did this together. This was something, and obviously at that stage, he's also trying to avoid the death penalty.
Right.
And so he starts to sell his cousin out as the main protagonist, as the lead, the boss, the one who killed more than him. That's how it usually goes when there's two people. One sells out the other.
Right. There's a weird tidbit of this story that before catching the guys, the police at one point hired a German psychic. Did you know that about this story?
No, I don't. I don't put a lot of value in psychics, just be clear. I mean, really, historically, almost back in the day, everyone used to hire psychics because that was like the sign of desperation. And it was pretty common if we would get some ancient detective in here. I mean, ancient. They would do, oh yeah, or the psychic would come forward is the other thing, which he probably.
That's happened in my dad's case. A psychic has come forward.
Yeah,
before.
The psychic comes forward and they say they have some knowledge of it and they tell some sort of story, and at some point there's connections made. But, it depends how many I don't put a lot of value in those kind of things.
You don't believe in astrology?
No.
I mean, we could look up the sign of these guys, and I bet we could tie it back to motive. What's your sign?
Gemini.
That makes sense.
I just changed my mind.
Maybe bonus episode idea. I do a chart reading for Richard.
I can better than you that. I have a former colleague, Gina Piccolo, plug here for her. She is a professional astrologer.
We should have her on the show. And we can do serial killer signs. So we know Kenneth cracks and starts to tell. Does Angelo offer up information as willingly, or is he a little bit harder to crack?
He's hard to crack. I mean, literally, they had a 10-month. So in the way court cases, you file the charges, and then you have a preliminary hearing to see if there's enough evidence to stand trial. The prelim in this case lasted 10 months. That's like longer than most trials run. And this eventually became, I think, the longest trial for a long time. It was the longest criminal trial proceeding as well. But yeah, this was just the enormous amount of fighting over evidence. It just went on a long time. This was a very hard-fought case. Just, yes, because there were so many victims, so many details, and just unraveling it all took so much time.
So did Kenneth ever explain why they did this? Or was that ever revealed throughout the trial, their motive?
Motive is always weird as well, especially with these people.
Let's talk about that. Because you don't have to prove motive in court. You just have to prove that they did it. Like, the why isn't necessarily, it helps, but it's not a key part, right? You don't have to prove that.
No, you doesn't. In the case when you don't know the victim well, motive is not that important.
Yeah.
Because most times you want motive, as we know, because the person has some interconnection, like it's their lover or their husband, their wife, their business partner. In other words, the motive is money, greed, But here, the motive is gratification in the end. I mean, unfortunately, it's these people. Is it more advanced? Is there a reason why they did it? Because of some trauma decades before? Yes. But in the end, the motive is always basically gratification in some form. All the serial killers are looking for some gratification. They enjoy the whole capturing and tying and just torturing the person and making them suffer. That's all part of their sort of MO and thinking. Here, it's, with two people, what's unusual is because they're interacting. So you don't know. It sounds like Bianca had more of the issues, but obviously they're both doing this and participating and covering up. So does one care about the others because that's what they're doing? No. In the end, they're both getting gratification to some degree.
Right.
It is pretty unusual for people to work in pairs, historically.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been some very famous serial pair killers, but it's still the rarest of phenomena.
Yeah. So what were the final sentences for both of them, and what were the official charges?
Well, Kenneth got convicted of 5 murders, as I can remember correctly, and his cousin 9 murders. Then Kenneth also got 2 more in Washington. Both get life without parole. They basically try to dodge the death penalty, which is always how these things go. In the end, they just never getting out of prison. There's a list on every governor's desk forever, which basically had their names on it, which said, if I can avoid it, I'll never want to be the one who let them out, because these are some of the most notorious serial killers in California history.
Wow. And on that note, there's even more to the story. There's recent updates that Richard will fill us in on, and we'll get into it after the break. Welcome back to LA Crimes. Okay, Richard, why are we talking about this today? There's more updates, recent headlines. What's the scoop? What's going on?
Okay, so Kenneth Bianchi is still alive. He has now spent 46 years in prison. He sits in a prison in Washington State, near Walla Walla State Prison. It's remote in the middle of nowhere. And he's basically up for parole in California. And so there gets a hearing. Oh, and this is another weird side note. He's changed his name to Anthony D'Amato 2 years ago. So, not that anyone doesn't know, he's still listed, by the way, in the California correctional records as Kenneth Bianchi, because it's right there when you.
Do you think that was like in a sort of attempt to, if I get out, I'll have a new name, maybe I'll parole?
Yes. I mean, he's tried to apparently lives a Christian life, and his claims to be a great inmate now.
He married a pen pal.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately
that.
common for serial killers.
From Louisiana.
It's amazing how many people who have committed one or even multiple murders seem to have married somebody from their prison cell. But yeah, he's been inside for a long time. His cousin died in prison.
They were in different prisons?
Yep.
Did they ever speak after sort of turning on each other? Like, did they ever reconcile? Do you know?
No, I'm not sure they reconciled. It's not uncommon usually it's rare for people to serve together or get anywhere near each other. Exception being the Menendez brothers, who eventually got transferred to the same prison.
I was just thinking that.
In San Diego. But generally, no, when they do things like this together, they generally, never together.
They weren't pen pals?
No, he's only interested in the women pen pals.
He was up for parole in Walla Walla.
Yep. So basically, he had a hearing. Actually, it was technically in Sacramento, but it was all electronically virtual, which is ironic.
I was going to say, do they fly him down for...
No, it was all it was all virtual, it was on Teams.
No way.
Yes. The whole hearing nowadays, because I'm just preparing for one with the Menendez brothers, they do it on Microsoft
my gosh, I can
Teams.
just imagine every time I open Teams, I have to update and re-download. I'm like, how annoying. They're late because they had to download Teams. I never have Teams on my computer.
Yeah, so basically that's how they do this. They did this. And yeah, they heard from people who were related to the victims. They heard from the prosecutor's office, and he made the pitch to try and get out. According to the prosecutor I talked to, he's still not. Here's the strange thing. So you realize, even though he essentially confessed and said a whole bunch of implications of himself, in the years later, he's basically claimed he was manipulated into that. And so he's actually over the years claimed in various appeals that he's basically innocent. Yeah, I know. It's very...
Who is representing him? He have a public defender?
Yeah. I mean, basically, yeah. well, it's paid for by the public.
Okay.
You know, you have numerous lawyers over the years, but essentially,
but no bigwig attorney is like, I'm gonna help you. Yeah.
Well, actually, you know, back in the day, there's some very good lawyers. You know, in these serial killer cases, you tend to give them really good defense lawyers because you want the case to stand up over time.
Right.
And you don't want to have to keep retrying these things.
Okay.
That's always the biggest mistake. I mean, how many cases have you probably heard about in the press where you got some jurisdiction in the South, like Louisiana or somewhere, they didn't have any adequate, so the lawyer fell asleep, etc. And they end up having to retry the thing decades later because it's all a mess. And yeah, that doesn't tend to happen in Los Angeles. Since the 70s, we've been giving people really good lawyers in murder cases. In fact, in our recent serial killer cases, we've literally given them not even the public defender, who does a very good job when it comes to murder, high-level murder cases, but we've even given them independent counsel paid for, like this, you know, at considerable expense because we just don't want to have to retry all the things.
Right.
It could never be raising the issue, oh, you never have an adequate lawyer, because we want you to have the best lawyers available now.
That's an interesting point that I've never thought about before.
Yeah, because it's just way cheaper just to have one
Just
trial
do it
than
once, yeah.
keep having new trials because you have a crappy lawyer and then we can use that against. That's the best defense. The best defense for an appeal is that your lawyer is useless.
Right. Wow. So what happened with the parole hearing?
Well, he hadn't had one. He the last time he had one, which is 15 years ago, they basically said, hey, come back in 15 years. Well, this time it's come back in 10, and this is not a young man by now.
I was going to ask, how old is he now?
I believe he's 74.
Wow.
And so, yeah, he's not, you know, his next real chance of getting out is like now 84. And the reality was, even if they'd say this parole board had decided they wanted to let him out, Gavin Newsom, I don't know if he was going to go with that. This is a serial killer. I mean, it's pretty rare. Well, it's pretty much unknown. Okay, so some of the Manson people even with the Manson family, where they didn't all directly, there was sort of a group involvement. Even there, you know, over the years, it's been very hard to get any of the governors of California, however liberal, to let them out. So, you know, this case, I don't know if it would ever got. I mean, I don't think too many politicians would want to be the ones signing this particular defendant out.
Yeah, I mean, it would be crazy for a politician to defend a criminal at that magnitude, wouldn't it be, Richard?
Yeah, it's pretty much. You would be pretty much the first thing on your opponent's campaign flyer would be, and your campaign ad all over YouTube would be this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not really happening. So, and he remains probably one of the best known serial killers still alive from an era where most of the serial killers are now dead.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll check back in 10 years if he's still alive and he has another parole hearing. Yeah,
there'll be yet another documentary made on him, or he'll do a whole, you know, he'll probably get his own podcast.
Hey.
From jail, from prison.
Yeah, and he'll record with guests via Teams. Thank you so much for being here.
In the sad world of killer these days, it's
Teams, the official video chat of prison.
Yeah, I actually sat through quite a few Menendez hearings recently, and the incredible link-up technology isn't very good.
Who would have guessed? Well, Richard, thank you so much for being here today. This was very insightful and very interesting, and a good reminder to stay inside. That's my motto. I just don't leave my house.
Actually, the reality is Los Angeles is currently probably safer in terms of homicide than it has been since this happened.
Why?
There's just far fewer murders. Violence levels are down. It may be also people aren't doing as much. There's more technology, more policing. people, a good percentage of our murders were gang related, and people are aware that they're going to get caught quite easily these days. So there's a myriad of reasons, social, economic, but in the end, it's probably somewhat people know they'll get caught more.
That's it for LA Crimes. If you like this show, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or go to latimes.com/podcast bonus. That's latimes.com/podcast bonus. You'll gain access to this week's bonus episode where Richard and I discuss the recent news about the murder of an American Idol executive and potential mistakes LAPD made in their initial handling of the case.